The wild still lingered in him and the wolf in him merely slept. San Francisco is gone. Nothing remains of it but memories. You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club. I'd rather sing one wild song and burst my heart with it, than live 1,000 years watching my digestion and being afraid of the wet. A bone to the dog is not charity. Charity is the bone shared with the dog, when you are just as hungry as the dog. Life is not always a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes, playing a poor hand well. Show me a man with a tattoo and I'll show you a man with an interesting past. Don't loaf and invite inspiration, light out after it with a club. The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. Intelligent men are cruel. Stupid men are monstrously cruel. Culture and collars had gone together, to him, and he had been deceived into believing that college educations and mastery were the same things. As one grows weaker, one is less susceptible to suffering. There is less hurt because there is less to hurt. But I am I and I won't subordinate my taste to the unanimous judgment of mankind. There were not words enough in the English language, nor in any language, to make his attitude and conduct intelligible to them. Life is not a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes, playing a poor hand as well. White Fang knew the law well, to oppress the weak and obey the strong. He was a killer, a thing that preyed, living on the things that lived, unaided, alone, by virtue of his own strength and prowess, surviving triumphantly in a hostile environment where only the strong survive. He wastes his time over his writing, trying to accomplish what geniuses and rare men with college educations sometimes accomplish. This expression of abandon and surrender, of absolute trust, he reserved for the master alone. It was during this period that he might have hearkened to the memories of the lair and the stream and run back to the wild. But the memory of his mother held him. So he remained in his bondage waiting for her. He was sounding the deeps of his nature, and of the parts of his nature that were deeper than he, going back into the womb of time. The ghostly winter silence had given way to the great spring murmur of awakening life. They alone moved through the vast inertness. They alone were alive. And they sought for other things that were alive in order that they might devour them and continue to live. Man rarely places a proper valuation upon his womankind, at least not until deprived of them. So that was the way. No fair play. Once down, that was the end of you. They were not half living, or quarter living. They were simply so many bags of bones in which sparks of life fluttered faintly. You stand on dead men's legs. You've never had any of your own. You couldn't walk alone between two sunrises and hustle the meat for your belly. He was a man without a past, whose future was the imminent grave and whose present was a bitter fever of living. Food and fire, protection and companionship, were some of the things he received from the god. In return, he guarded the god's property, defended his body, worked for him, and obeyed him. He had been suddenly jerked from the heart of civilization and flung into the heart of things primordial. The press of the United States? It is a parasitic growth that battens on the capitalist class. Its function is to serve the established by molding public opinion, and right well it serves it. Denied the outlet, through play, of his energies, he recoiled upon himself and developed his mental processes. He became cunning, he had idle time in which to devote himself to thoughts of trickery. It was the masterful and incommunicable wisdom of eternity laughing at the futility of life and the effort of life. It was the wild, the savage, frozen-hearted Northland wild. He had killed man, the noblest game of all, and he had killed in the face of the law of club and fang. But the wild is the wild, and motherhood is motherhood, at all times fiercely protective whether in the wild or out of it. Thus it was that in obedience to the law laid down by his mother, and in obedience to the law of that unknown and nameless thing, fear, he kept away from the mouth of the cave. Every book was a peephole into the realm of knowledge. His hunger fed upon what he read, and increased. He was justifying his existence, than which life can do no greater, for life achieves its summit when it does to the uttermost that which it was equipped to do. Life is not a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes playing a poor hand well. She was thrilling to a desire that urged her to go forward, to be in closer to that fire, to be squabbling with the dogs, and to be avoiding and dodging the stumbling feet of men. I do not live for what the world thinks of me, but for what I think of myself. The human race is doomed to sink back farther and farther into the primitive night ere again it begins its bloody climb upward to civilization. He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things, and not in their significances. For the pride of trace and trail was his, and sick unto death, he could not bear that another dog should do his work. His bondage had softened him. Irresponsibility had weakened him. He had forgotten how to shift for himself. The night yawned about him. Is love so gross a thing that it must feed upon publication and public notice? It would seem so. Much of the wild had been lost, so that to them the wild was the unknown, the terrible, the ever menacing and ever warring. But to him, in appearance and action and impulse, still clung the wild. And so it came that White Fang learned that the right to punish was something the gods reserved for themselves and denied to the lesser creatures under them. It was what should have been a bright summer day, but the smoke from the burning world filled the sky, through which the sun shone murkily, a dull and lifeless orb, blood-red and ominous. Limited minds can recognize limitations only in others.